Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. If you're watching on YouTube, you can find out more about what we do at officehours.global. Our first hour is general discussion about media production, and our second hour is usually something we want to spend a little bit more time on. And today we're going to do a little prognostication. What is going to happen? What are the trends? What do we think is going to happen over the next year as we look forward, or the next couple of years? And so this is the beginning of the year. It's a good time to think about it. So we'll think about it in relations to graphics, AI graphics, regular graphics, those types of things. Each day this week we'll be doing that. So anyway, so if you've got ideas, you can go ahead and tag those as questions in Mukana and just throw them in as you don't have to have a question about it. You can just have a suggestion. What do you think is going to happen next year? So throw those comments or questions in. Of course, you can throw any comments in, general questions into Mukana. And if you don't have Mukana, you can go to askofficehours.global. That's this little QR code right here, askofficehours.global, and you can ask those questions 24/7. So anytime you think of a question, we've got a lot of them. I'm still pushing them in. There were so many that came in from there. But if you've got questions, go ahead and put those questions in there. Even if you're watching this later, you can throw those questions in. All right, let's go ahead and jump into the first question. Mitchell, what do we have?
Thank you, Alex. First in, TJ Asher from Minneapolis, Minnesota. If I shoot some video for slow motion at, say, 50 frames per second or more, how do I bring that into my editor, Final Cut Pro or Resolve, to get it to slow-mo?
Go ahead, Chris.
So, TJ, if you take that clip and you pull it, the important thing to remember here is the difference between frame rate and time base. And the two are related, and they're kind of confusing, I'll admit. But Final Cut just deals with it for you. If you drag a clip that was shot at 60 frames per second and the time base is 30 frames per second, it'll play in real time. If you slow it down to 50%, it'll just figure it out for you. Final Cut is very elegant in the way it just sort of makes that potentially confusing thing very easy. As for Resolve, nobody knows. Nobody knows how that works.
You simply change it. Yeah, if you change the frame rate, it will slow it down. So you can definitely get it to play back slower. And if you wonder why would you want to play it slower, just search Bill Murray slow motion, and you'll see it's the best slow motion clip ever made. Go ahead, CJ.
And so is that just using the Command R to bring up the retime bar, or are you actually reconforming something there?
Well, and I admit that I don't do as much slow motion as most people do, but you should be able to, in the clip, I just retime it, and the frame should be there. The main thing you have to think about is whole frames. Whole frames. Don't drag it. So if you are what you don't want to do is create in-between frames. And so you have to, so if you're going to bring a clip in at 120 frames a second, it has to, you can do it any way you want, but you really want to be thinking about whole frames when you slow down. So if you're going to 30 frames a second, it's half or a quarter, but it's not like 75, or 78% or 80%. Mm-hmm. Don't make that a slider. You have to jump whole sets of frames evenly divisible into that, and otherwise you're going to end up with it making up frames, and that nobody likes that. So, and you can see it happen. I actually saw it on a movie we were just talking about, where obviously someone slowed something down a little bit, and you'll see this weird little thing I notice it because I know what to look for, but you'll notice this little jumpy thing that goes on, or inner frame interpolation that goes on if someone slows down in a fractional rate. So just make sure that you're slowing down correctly. Yeah, go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, I always wanted to know if you're working with a variety of different formats coming in, does Final Cut transcode everything to standard ProRes on its timeline, and then in that transform into the working files, does it throw away the frames from a 60 frame cut?
I actually don't know how it handles that process specifically. It can transcode. I will admit that I don't know much about that because I conform all my files before I put them into Final Cut or into Resolve. So I convert my files to what I want. And if I've got a 120 frame per second thing, I convert it back to another 120. I convert everything to ProRes before I start editing because I just don't.
ProRes at the frame rate you want it to play back.
No, I conform
ProRes at the
It's original frame rate.
It's original frame rate. I don't want to change anything about it except for its format to do that, unless it's like interlace or something, some junk like that, and then I might make it progressive because who wants to deal with the interlace? Go ahead, Mitchell.
When I'm working with Premiere, if it's the 30-frame project and I bring a 120-frame effect or video clip, it's going to go in slow-mo. It just does that unless you conform it, like you were just saying.
Yeah, it can't. Some will do it automatic. Sometimes it'll do it automatically. I've had it where it will correct for it. Like it just corrects for the time. So it's a question whether it's time-based or frame-based. Next question.
Next one in from Tim Holm in San Lorenzo, California. How did the COVID-19 pandemic and its aftermath shape the evolution of live streaming media? In other words, what changed and what has lasted? What advances need to happen next?
I go ahead, Nigel.
So I think the most important thing about the early days of COVID is we all watched The Tiger King. And everybody in the country, for the first time, I think in a long time, all ended up watching. So no, joking aside, the reality was with production shut down and us stuck at home, most of us as consumers went into particularly Netflix and Amazon and the other streaming services and started looking for content. And I think we started with so little on the linear broadcast television, we started to looking for increased amount of content from on-demand providers, which then meant everybody piled into those things, and we had the worst renaming, which ended up with Max and all the other services. And now I think then people started producing a huge amount of very expensive content for those services, most of which was not very good because it didn't have the work done on it. And we're sort of stuck now, I think, in a no man's land when we haven't had, because of the strike, new content on broadcast TV. The value of some of those libraries is not as good when you've seen much of what you want to see. And we're going to see, I think, a consolidation of the streamers. I think we talked about this before in office hours. The biggest fear for me is we're going to end back up with two providers, two streaming type services, where we end up buying a whole bunch of channels we're never going to watch again because the whole unbundling thing sort of fell apart. But I do think it has forever changed the way people watch TV programs and movies at home. It's affected the cinemas, it's affected the advertising industry, it's affected a lot of things. And whether it's an unintended consequences or not, I think it was the end of broadcast media. It's not dead yet, but as they used to say on Wall Street, it's a dead cat bouncing.
Yeah, go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, as far as on the head end of the industry and the production side, COVID-19 threw a big monkey wrench into everything. I heard stories of editors that were in the middle of editing major motion pictures, and they have editorial facilities at the studios at Warner Brothers, for example. They had 1 day notice that they were closing down the studio, and you were not going to be allowed back on the lot. And these are multi-million-dollar movies that are in the middle of post-production. The editors had to go in and quickly grab hard drives. They had 1 day to go in and move their entire editing systems to home without any type of organization, without any type of planning, without any kind of infrastructure put in to be able to handle this. And then they had to all figure it out later. And so once they got all these transferred the movie to portable hard drives and beefed up their home systems to be able to edit these things and do Foley and post-production sound and everything else at home, it kind of and it stood that way for like a year and a half. A year or so, the studios were closed. It changed post-production completely. It moved a lot of people once the pandemic passed and they opened up the studios again. A lot of them kept editing from home and kept doing sound effects at home and Foley at home. So it didn't go back to 100% back to the studio. So it did cause a bit of a paradigm shift in the way production is done. Yeah. They still have the stages now that they shoot on. But that changed radically for about 2 years with the new rules that were put in place that slowed down production because of having to adhere to all the testing rules and the masking rules and the areas of production. You could, dividing up each individual workspace into finite little islands that you couldn't go between, et cetera. So it's changed quite a bit. And it hasn't, the testing and stuff, islands have gone away to some extent, or to the, illegally to all extent, but it hasn't gone completely back to normal.
Yeah, it's interesting. As far as the rush to streaming, basically once House of Cards came out, everyone was on the path. So once there was like Netflix was kind of fiddling about with original content, and no one really. I was kind of I was in a lot of those conversations early on. And so we were doing streams for networks, internal streams that were talking about it for years. Of course, we're all going to have an app, and of course, we're all going to have a streaming service and everything else. And so they were all kind of going that direction. I think that COVID probably accelerated it by a year or two, but it was all in the pipeline by the time COVID hit, because they had all been planning for it for quite some time, because they saw what Netflix was doing. They didn't believe Netflix could pull it off until House of Cards. And then at that point, everyone panicked. That was really the panic moment for most of the broadcasters. Like, oh, they're really going to do production, and so so I think that, but from a streaming perspective, not a live streaming perspective, I think that one of the things that's interesting is that I was just reading an article this morning before the show that obviously the unsubscribes are going up by a lot. Like they're starting to tick up as people unsubscribe from different services. A lot of them come back, but you're losing 30% of the population in the last 2 years have unsubscribed to up to 3, I think, and now half of them come back and resubscribe at some other point in time. But they're having a hard time. I think you're going to actually you're seeing Apple's doing live, Netflix is experimenting with live. They're building up a crew for that. There's a lot of more people doing live, and the reason for that is that if you do it well, live, the cost per minute is significantly lower, and you can do it more often, and it makes it so that they can have things that are worth staying subscribed for more often. And that's why sports are so important. If you look at Apple spending a ton of money on MLS and YouTube spending a ton of money on the NFL, sports get you to come back. They get you to come back into the system, stay subscribed to the system, and not just sports, but live in general. So I think that we're going to see more and more live, kind of going down that path. But those are the big streamers. I think that the other thing that we're seeing is that this conversation comes up all the time, that people, COVID pushed everybody to do events online. Then they all want to come back and do them in person. And there's a lot of people that are excited about coming back and doing in person. There's about 30% of the people that were coming that aren't coming anymore. That's a big number. Like it's a big number that everyone's paying attention to. It's not everybody. I mean, there's 60% there's 30% that are super excited. This is what it seems like it cuts up into. There's 30% of the people that are super excited about coming back to physical events. There's 30% that are like, yeah, sure. Like everybody else is there, I'll go. And then 30% that just won't come back. And they're trying to serve them with hybrid events, and they haven't been very successful. Average view time is the problem that they're having. People just aren't staying. They'll come and check it out for 5 or 10 minutes, and then they leave. And so they're, this is going to be the thing that we're going to see people wrestle with, is how to make that actually work over the next couple of years. But it's not going to be one or the other. It's not going to be live or in person. But figuring out exactly what that mix is something that a lot of money is going to go into over the next probably 3 or 4 years. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael, for large-scale streamed events, how is the pipeline from event site to user built? Are the AWS Elemental encoders the market leader?
Yeah, I mean, I would say generally, I was doing a walkthrough at a location a couple weeks ago, and they had probably, I think, 20 of the big Elemental, like 800s or 900s or something like that. They were all stacked up there that were ready to get installed and everything else. They're just still in their boxes. As far as the Elemental encoders, I would say that not the links that we're using. Those are they're very convenient and they're great for those things. But and there's lots of people that make them. Like this show is not on the Elemental encoders. This show is on the. My mind's going to space on that one. Talons are the encoders that we're using, and they're Osprey Talons. For some reason, I always want to call Osprey Albatross, which is not a good. Don't call your company Albatross, but Osprey and Albatross, the two birds are in the same head place in my head. Anyway, so the Elemental encoders we see everywhere. These are software-defined hardware encoders. They're just giant PCs that are really set up for this, and I've used them for the last 15 years or so, and so they are. I would say that most heavy-duty encoding that we see on site that's going to do ingest. Now, even Elemental's trying to move more and more away and more into the cloud. So these encoders become less important, but there's a lot of places where you just want to have that control. So those Elementals are still, I would say probably, I don't know, it's hard to say if there is the industry standard, but they've definitely weathered and probably are the majority of large-scale, high-end contribution. Next question.
Next one in is a QR code question from Chuck Hodges in Tuolumne, California. So with no low latency Zoom view planned for the future and Mukana not showing the YouTube right, is the live show and Prestos now canceled today to upload later? What happens with the other days like this?
I'm not sure. I think this is dealing with the fact that, and normally this is a Sunday question. We won't delve into this too much, but as we get ready to start doing multi-channel streaming and as well as HDR streaming and everything else, the pipeline of going back into Zoom is really not sustainable. So we're not going to be doing a quiet theater anymore, and it has to do with the pipeline that we're building going forward. It just doesn't. It's not going to make sense. The YouTube one is 20 seconds behind, and we may experiment with going to a lower latency for that. But I don't. As we're asking questions, I'm not sure that it. The most important thing to me is that all the latencies are very close together so that everyone in the chat has the same latency. And right now it's kind of it's been this disjointed thing where half the audience is in one latency and the other half is in another. So now everybody's in the same one. So anyway, so that's, and also as we start to package up, we'll, I'm not sure what we'll do with the pre-show. So we'll stand by for that. Next question.
Tim Holm from San Lorenzo, California, has a question. I saw a documentary where a bunch of reporters were setting up their gear on stepladders, looking things. There were ladders of all sizes, even small ones for them to sit on. Wouldn't a tripod be better?
Go ahead, Courtney.
Well, no, because a tripod usually only goes up to about 5 feet to 6 feet because it's designed to have an operator usually standing on the ground looking at the camera and operating that camera. What they do is a lot of times in a situation where there's a scrum of, paparazzi or people with cameras around an event, the ladder, even a 6-foot ladder, you take that and you get one of these hi-hats and you C-clamp that to the top and mount your head on top of the hi-hat, which is then clamped to the top of the ladder. Then you've got a above the heads of all the other people, clear shot at whatever you're shooting, and you've got a ladder that you can stand on. You can go up 1 or 2 steps, depending upon how tall the cameraman is, to be able to see and operate the camera with something that you can fold up and throw in your car or on top of your car. So it's easier to travel with, and it gets you above the height of all the other people around you. So the aluminum ladder comes in handy, and you see a lot of photographers that do documentaries traveling with them and a hi-hat in order to get them above the heads of the people around them.
Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah. Alex, I love the story you tell about being in Africa, Rwanda, I believe, where you said you were watching the news. They told one story, and you wait a second, I'm there. And you walk out and you look and you realize there's a lot of power to just lifting a camera a little or bringing it down. And that's what they're doing, Tim, is they're affecting the way their shot looks.
I was watching New Year more recently. What Chris is talking about is I was in Zimbabwe during the elections in 2000, and they were showing, CNN International was showing all these crowds that were in Harare, and I was like, I'm in downtown Harare, and I walked out and the streets were bare. Like there was not a single person on the street. I was like, I don't even know where they're shooting that. Like it was there because everyone was afraid of what was going to happen next. So no one was on the streets. And so anyway, but the more recently, what I thought was really interesting is you watch the New Year's Eve. I mean, I was hoping that I was going to get on YouTube Live and be able to watch the New York feed of the ball so that I didn't have to stay up until midnight. But they offset it for us, unfortunately. So. I got to figure out how to change. I'm going to literally use a VPN next year so that I can change my location so that I can celebrate. I like celebrating New Year's when it enters the United States as opposed to when it gets to California so that I can go to bed. So anyway, but what I thought was interesting is I was looking through some of the live feeds on YouTube, and you watch all these shows and it feels like a show and everybody's in it and there's all this big crowd. And when they there was a shots that I think Earth Stream or whatever had up above, and it just looks like the most pathetic thing ever. Like it's just this weird thing with all these people in these little pens, and you're just like, wow, that is so uninspiring. And it was it looks great when you have the camera down low and you pull it up, and you're like, I would never do that. That looks like the dumbest thing ever. And so it's just an interesting thing about the camera angle. To go back to this though, what often happens, in smaller events, you will see reporters getting to bring ladders and stuff like that. Generally, when we've done these with a camera pen, we don't let them bring anything in. Like they can bring a tripod in, and now we give them a riser. So what we do is we rise. We'll have a riser here. So here's the stage, let's say, and we'll have a riser here, and we supply typically power. And we'll give them a mult box. That's the audio, so they can pop their audio into there. And some of them will bring transmitters, and some of them will bring cables and everything else. And then what we do is, and usually the camera ops and the photographers oftentimes share the same pen, which is kind of chaos. If you wonder why all those cameras are bouncing, it's because of the photographers. Photographers they're just getting the shots that they want. They're not sensitive to bouncing because they're taking pictures. And so they just are moving all over the place. But what typically happens is there'll be some boxes, some taped boxes that say like, CNN and ABC. And so the big networks they have their own spaces, but everybody else, it's like a scrum. Like they're all just trying to figure out where it is really a mess. Now what we do when we do these is that we put another box right here. That's our camera. And then we box this out for our operator. So no one's we stanchion it. We don't even put tape on it. Like you can't go in there. We'll kick you off the thing. So there's this space that our operator exists in, and we've even gotten to the point where we quietly cut this out so that the operator isn't the operator isn't shaking with the rest of the pen. And then we put our camera here, and then we take that camera and we provide that to the pull feed. And what will happen if you do that, for all of you, anybody watching that's going to be in politics next year, do this 10 times in a row, and by the end, the only cameras left will be the network. Because all the other ones, their producers will see this rock-solid, high-quality feed. Use a Super 35 sensor, put it less than 75 feet away, and let the pen sit there and shake all they want, and you have this rock-solid, beautiful shot, and it's free to them. They don't have to pay a stringer to go out and do it. And the networks will keep sending cameras because they believe that that's important to them. But everybody else will stop because they just won't pay for it. They're like, hey, I got this great feed. I don't need it. As a local news or whatever, I got a great feed and I don't have to pay $800 or $1,200 to do that. And they'll make that choice. And then everything calms down. And we've done that in the past for years like this year. Go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, I was watching that Worldcast 4K feed from Times Square. Surely there's a better place in New York City where we can show all of this activity because from that angle, it seemed like there is only about a space of about 6 feet wide where Anderson Cooper and Eddie Cohen were standing in a corner, and then right across from them was Ryan Seacrest. It was sort of like a hallway with a space cam.
Because there's only one shot that really makes sense going down that street, and so it's just there's a limited amount of there's a shot that everybody wants, and they all have to have their own little patch of it. And this is really common for many of these events, whether it's conventions, conferences, where there's a big whatever, there's a whole bunch of press and they all want the same they all want the same spot. Like there's and there's months of negotiation or sometimes years. I mean, at this point everyone knows where they belong and where they're going to get what they're going to get. They all get the same space every year. But there's a pecking order there of who is the biggest and who gets to have the right shot. But they all want to be right next to each other because the shot behind them, they want a specific thing, and that's the thing that they're trying to figure out. Yeah, go ahead.
And there's a huge number of people, VIPs or producers, just circulating around at different
chaos.
levels.
I don't understand.
It's wild.
It makes my skin crawl just thinking about it. Yeah, go ahead, Nigel.
Yeah, I was watching the CNN feed, and I was able to get the New York feed, and I was watching it for the same reason you were, that I was trying to plan New Year to end when the ball dropped, on New Year's Eve to end. But I was greatly entertained by CNN being stuck with at least one of their camera angles had a billboard that Fox News kept showing an ad on. And every time that ad started, they had to cut away again. And so that was very smart placement by one of them and stupidity by the other.
That's really good. There'll be more closed up sets after that, and you know the planning for those sets, even though they look simple, is months of planning. Yeah, go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, that's the ultimate counter programming. It's live, practical counter programming. You know, there's two ways to set a shot, and this does fall back to the whole tripod thing. You can either walk into a room and say, put the camera here. Or you could put a camera. And the first time I saw a real DP do this, he sets up the camera in the studio, and then everything comes in, and we're going to put that there. We're going to put that there. We're going to bring this here. We're going to put this can right there. There we go, right there. And that's why Apple boxes were invented, because you don't know how tall the table or anything is going to be. What they're doing at Times Square is a little different because, you know, you're not going to put the billboard on an Apple box, but it's a little of both. You go, okay, look, I need those billboards like that. I want to see okay, so we're going to put the camera here. And then you bring everything else into frame. And that's why it really only looks good from that one angle. And yes, I saw that wide shot, Alex.
Yeah.
And it looked like a pandemonium.
Yeah.
It looked like two moving trucks had ran into each other and everything fell out of it in the middle of the intersection.
Yeah, it was an amazing thing, but showing you how an angle changes how it feels. Because when the cameras are down in there, it's like, oh, everybody's having a great time. When the camera's up, you're like, wow, that's a horrible 5 hours. Anyway, next question.
John Snyder from Reno, Nevada. Is there a way to crop or blur specific parts of a window during a live screen share in Zoom?
Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah. What I do, John, is I use it's an accessibility feature, and you have to go turn it on and stuff. But you hold down a keyboard modifier, and I use the little scrolly thing on my mouse. So, for example, here is a whole screen. You could tell there's an Apple monitor up here, and if I pull the dock down, you can see the thing. But let's say I only want to talk about this OWC hub. If I hold down the keyboard modifier and scroll, there I've gone, and I'm just showing you the part of the screen that I want. Now, there's also a checkbox that allows you to tilt and pan if you pull the mouse to the edge of the frame. You don't necessarily have to use that. But yeah, I have it set for the control key and the scroller. And I do this quite a bit, even when I'm editing. Sometimes I'll zoom in on the timeline. I'll go, well, here's the problem. You know, these two clips kind of fight with each other. Can we move this over here? Okay, yeah, let's do that.
Go ahead, Jason.
Yeah, Fenwick said it pretty much. It's control and then scroll, and it's an accessibility feature. This works really, really, really well, especially because macOS for the last 5 or 6 versions has been 100% rendered. So you can push directly in, and it will actually resample based on how you're rolling in, and it breaks down at some point. But you know, more or less, it works pretty well.
I do think that in software, both on PC and the Mac, so OBS, vMix, and Mimo Live, I believe have blur functions within their layers, and so you can build a function that would just blur it, you know, if you wanted to. But will it do it natively? I don't think so. And so I do believe that there are some blur functions that can be added in all of those packages somewhere hidden in there. And so we'll take a look at that. It's kind of an interesting, you know, puzzle. We've had hardware that'll do it, but I haven't had software that will do it. I mean, I haven't tried to do it with software. Yeah, go ahead, Chris.
There's one other quick thing. There's another keyboard shortcut. It's and again, accessibility, the zoom tab, and at the top of the window, I can't remember what they call it, but it's like a whole handful of keyboard modifiers, and I believe it's the defaults to the number 8. And the first time I saw this was 15, 20 years ago. I think it was Joseph Lenashke was doing a demo. And what that function does is wherever you put your mouse, if you hit that keyboard shortcut, it goes right to where your mouse was, right, and then back. And the first time I saw it, I was like, oh, that's a gangster move. That was really cool. And somebody did it like at Macworld or something. And the next thing you know, every like pro level demo artist had figured out how to do this. And it caught on like wildfire.
You good, CJ?
And I've mentioned this once before, but a great use of the Stream Deck Plus with the little dials is to make the counterclockwise be the zoom out keyboard shortcut, the clockwise be the zoom in shortcut, and then the tap be the Command Option 8 to zoom in and out. And now you have a physical dial to do that. It's pretty slick.
That's ninja. That's great. Good tip.
We need a Zoom Lab.
Yeah, Zoom Lab. Next question.
Vic Hernandez from Springfield, Missouri. I've worked in telecommunications for 25 years, and I've seen the magic of what's over the horizon. Do you think we'll realize the promise of 5G?
Good, Nigel.
So I think lots of people actually have seen some promise of 5G, particularly in industrial uses and businesses who have managed to get the benefit. I think as consumers, if you haven't seen it yet, you're never going to see it. Because while there's probably a few years left on the rollout, I think they've probably got to most of the consumers, at least in the US, in a way at a speed we're ever going to see it. I think what's interesting is over the horizon is a G6. Whether that really takes off or whether Starlink can make a different experience by giving us Wi-Fi in a blanket over the country, I think is a really interesting question. But if you haven't seen it yet, you may never see it.
Good, Courtney.
As far as mobile cellular goes, 5G, they kind of rolled it out in millimeter wave, which was the high-speed version that delivers the amazing high-speed data. But the problem is because of the millimeter wave, it doesn't travel very far. It doesn't penetrate walls. It gets knocked out by trees. Anything with water in it is a great blocker for 5G. So you would have to have cell sites all, like every 200 feet or 300 feet. And so it got really expensive to try and roll out. They put it out on a lot of congested areas, in the millimeter wave. But so they dropped back and they said, well, let's just take a lot of those 900 megahertz frequencies and 700 megahertz frequencies and call them 5G and update the cellular towers so that they can handle a little bit higher speed data, maybe twice as fast as 4G. And we'll just call that 5G, and that's what they've done right now. So it depends on what your terminology of 5G is. A lot of times they'll call ultra 5G is the millimeter wave, and it's best suited for point-to-point, like Nigel was saying. If you have a static thing where you're not traveling and having to hand off that 5G signal between towers, and the towers aren't close enough together, so you would get dropouts, that's a problem. So now they have it so that it kind of fluctuates in bandwidth as you travel between the low frequency 5Gs and the high frequency 5Gs. So it's kind of a mishmash now, unless you've got point-to-point stationary and you've got line of sight to a 5G tower.
Yeah, my daughter has Verizon on her phone, and she's got 5G. It says 5G when it pops up. It is so slow she can't play music on Spotify. Like it is, talk about a complete fail. Go ahead, Jason.
Yeah, I turned 5G off, and I have for a very, very long time. In essence, next week when I'm at CES, I might turn it on, but chances are I may actually very well leave it off because I've found that a lot of phones, it's the frailty of the default. It's not actually the fact that 5G is better. But if you don't live in a city where you have to fight for parking, you're not really going to realize any benefit to 5G.
Yeah, I mean, they're trying to take C-band so that they can have, they're screwing up a whole bunch of C-band solutions elsewhere so that they can try to get longer distance, and that's part of that rollout plan. But it is probably, I don't know if it's the most massive failure in technology rollout ever, but it's pretty close. It's definitely in the top 5, of just the immense amount of money that was just basically funneled into the ground. It's just an amazing thing. I mean, a lot of people got rich, it just didn't produce any results. We would have been better with just making LTE a little bit better, which is exactly what they did. Next question.
Andy Kokendorfer from Vieira, Florida asked, Alex, you mentioned that it's hard to keep the 30% of attendees that are online during hybrid events to stay. How do you keep online audiences from leaving?
We're going to talk about that at Silicon Valley Video, and we're going to try to stream it. They don't stream the whole thing, but we're going to try to actually have a conversation about that. That's going to be on January 23rd, and a bunch of us are all going to be, jumping in from all over the world to talk about it, a couple of speaking. I think that the future, and we've done pieces of all of these things already. So what we found was that you have to find a way that an audience really feels included. And that there's a couple different places that we've done that in the past. One is what I believe is that you get rid of the stage. So you project everybody on the screen. So if you're in the audience, in the physical audience, people think, oh, you have to see someone on stage. Not really. People came so they could see each other. They could meet each other. They could have drinks together. They could go to the expo. They could talk to people. They could rub shoulders with folks and so on and so forth. They think that they need the stage, but they don't. They don't need the people speaking. In fact, what you limit when you do the stage is who can show up for that stage. Like who can come? You know, it's only that area, or is it only in LA? Like we're going to have in the 30 minutes that we're talking at SVV, we're going to have, we're going to be representing Africa and Asia and Europe and the United States and Australia all in one talk. The getting everybody from that group together in one place would have been the entire budget for the entire show, to do that. And so, and all those people would have had to give up 5 to 7 days to fly in, deal with jet lag, do all the other things, instead of get there a half an hour before the show and be in the show and then leave. And that's I don't even want to go to Berkeley. I have to speak I not have to. I get to speak at a class for a day or an hour or whatever in Berkeley in March. I just said, hey, do you guys have a Zoom projection? Can you do that? Because now everybody has that, right? All the classrooms have that because of COVID. They're like, oh, yeah, we can do that. But are you sure you don't want to come in? I'm like, no, because it's my day. It's like the whole day for me to go speak for an hour. It's a whole day of me driving to Berkeley, getting caught in traffic, coming back. The 580 is not as bad as the 405, but it's a challenge. And so I'm going to lose a whole day going there and back. Or I can just jump on from my office, which I'm all set up for, and I can do this, which I can't do when I'm in person, and so I have a much better setup there. So I think people have this idea that they need it. I think that once you start breaking away from the stage, once you take people off the stage, it'll take years because people have old ideas. But it'll take years, but they will slowly start to realize that I can now bring guests in from all over. So we're proposing that to other conferences of just give us one room. Like NAB has 22 rooms or whatever of stuff. I'm like, give me one, just one room. Like that has Zoom, just one room with Zoom and let me bring people in and then people can decide whether they like it or not, but I think that they will. And the thing is that now you have all these speakers that weren't available. And why it's important for the online audience is they're getting the same experience. There's this subconscious feeling like you're in the back of the room when you put a camera there and there's a stage. And so they're getting a show. For the online person, you're getting a show. In addition to that, taking questions from the online audience. So when I do online, I take one question from the room, one question from online, one question from the room, one question from online. I go back and forth. There's two big things about that. One is you're making sure the online audience knows that you're going to take questions from them. Number two, it's much easier to run the cameras because I always know where the mic's going to go. I only need one camera to follow the mic because there's only one mic. There is, or whatever. I'm going to go from when I do the online question, it means I can reset the cameras. I don't have to jump from camera to camera to camera to camera. So there's some logistical reasons that works out better as well. But making sure that they're there. And then there is figuring out how you, one of the problems really is that Q&A really needs to be the majority of what you do in an event. Post those videos ahead of time, let people think about those things. Not all of them will watch the video, so you still have a short presentation, but you want to shorten the presentation and extend the Q&A because that's what engages people. That's where you see average view time jump. Where average view time really suffers is so we have found that your audience will drop off. We did a lot of eye tracking. Your audience will stop paying really attention to you 6 to 7 minutes into just talking. They'll stop paying attention to you. If you put up a slide, they'll stop paying attention in 90 seconds. And so the thing is that so you have to move away, and it's just moving away from a lot of the old things that we did. People thought that it worked in the room, but it didn't really. I mean, any of us who have shot reverse shots for the crowd, the hunting that we have to do to find a shot of somebody actually paying attention to the stage is super hard. Like you think that, everyone's in there and they're with rapt attention. They're checking their email, they're texting, they're falling asleep. I mean, I'm the one that has to shoot that. Like we're cutting around trying to have cameras hunting around trying to find one little group of people where someone isn't like, falling asleep or just with their arms folded and looking down like this or just texting and doing their email. Anyway, Nigel?
Yeah, I started watching the other day the new film, The Flash, I couldn't get more than 25 minutes in it before I was bored. And they spent hundreds of millions of dollars on that. So if you're putting on an event, for the people who are the virtual ones, unless you put a level of quality into that event, you will not retain people. Yeah. And there's something funny whenever I go to CES or something, I much prefer to watch the main tents in the breakout rooms because there's often desks there and coffees, and it's a much more social activity. In fact, I've been known to wish they just let me watch it in my hotel room because there's content I want in there. I just don't want to be in the room to do it. When I'm in the room, I'm so far at the back, I'm watching a screen anyway. I do think that we have to rethink about, even in physical events, whether you need main tent plenary rooms and how you break that idea. And for the people who are there, they can be in smaller breakout rooms the same way people remotely are. And then I think we'll start to see it programmed for the viewer, not for the organizer.
Well, and we have to remember that when I started streaming, like when we started streaming some of these events, there were 15,000 people in the room and 300 people watching online. At that point, it made sense just to stream it. Like it didn't make, when it was 99% in the room, it just meant just put a camera in the back and let people be part of it. At this point, most of these events, the vast majority of viewers are remote. And so you really have to start building this, you're reversing the show, which is it's really a show for the online, and some people get to come. And it's a different thought process. When we, to Nigel's point, when I went to TED Africa, they had a big plenary, with all the rows that you would normally have in the stage. And then over across this walkway, they had like this viewing area where people could sit around, have coffee and watch the big screens, 80-inch screens or whatever of the thing. I started over here, and within a day was over there. It was so much more comfortable. Your legs up, you're talking to people, everything else. It was just a lot more fun. And so I think that the idea of packing everybody in is still, it's old. Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, there's so much to unpack here. So, Alex, first of all, the thing about being in person, I mean, really only the first 10 to 15 rows of people are actually looking at the person on stage.
But
anyway, everybody's watching.
Even they're falling asleep. We do the reverses. Even they're falling asleep.
Here's the thing about the finding. You're talking about finding the good shots.
God.
I got news for you. I'm the one who has to edit the stuff. Yeah. And the stuff that you think looked okay as you were searching around, there's definitely 2 or 3 people in the background that are nodding out that we only see when we get into post. It's like, we can't use that shot.
Yeah.
And then the other thing you said that one day we may have a world where the stage is just a screen. There's no actual stage. Nobody's standing on screen. So the question then would be, does that mean that your primary speakers would be offsite, could be offsite, or would you build a little Zoom studio for them on site?
We've done that.
And one last question, I think, or comment. I think the biggest issue with all of this is that over the last, I'm going to say 50 or 60 years, maybe since Kennedy, so 60 years, the Kennedy-Nixon debate was really the thing. People realized, I got to be good in presenting to people. In this decade and this, that, and the other thing, you gotta have that speech down. You gotta know how to present to people. And I think the people over the last 60 years have gotten good at, I need to be able to project to a crowd. It is the next generation of great presenters that are going to polish the skill of presenting to a lens.
Well, and that shift is, you have people say, well, I can't do it because there's not people in front of me. Well, that's a stage actor. A stage actor wants to have all that audience, and they love that and everything else. But then you look at a film actor. A film actor is looking at a camera and emoting incredible emotions while there's 60 people around doing something else. They're all like doing their thing and working on. They're on this thing and they're making and everyone's quiet on stage if you're lucky. But
except for Christian Bale.
I know. I was going to point that out. So anyway, do not talk while Kristen Bale is trying to emote. So anyway, but the thing is that stage actors need that audience, but there's a lot of actors. Like I've worked with bands, and some bands need the audience. But we did this thing with Brian Vander Ark from the Birth Pipe, and he came up and he was he did the best version of Freshman I've ever seen. Like, it was just this incredible version of Freshman. And I was like, you're really in a space there. And he goes, well, usually there's a lot of people and your heart gets up a little bit faster and there's a lot of things going on and you just can't emote that way. When there's nobody when there was just a screen, it was a screen on people in another place that he was playing to. When you're in that environment, it was just much calmer, And so the thing is that, there's pluses and minuses to both. But when you have one screen, the other thing to think about, number one, is we had one event where we had four we took four meeting rooms and turned them into camera rooms. It might have been more than that. It might have been six of them actually. So they were still at the physical location, but they had a backdrop and they had their whole thing, and we set them all up. And we ran all those events. And so some people were remote and some people were local, but everybody was in this case, Hangouts.
Were they seated or standing, or did you give them a choice?
They were all, because it was, they were talking back and forth. The reason you don't want standing is because people walk around. They have those nervous habits. So the nervous habits of them walking around, people will pace, and that ruins, that's not good for being on the stage. We tell people to walk and post. So we spike the stage and we tell them, while you're setting something up, walk to the next post. When you're going to say something important, you want to be standing in one place. And the reason for that is that our cameras will come in and they'll get you head and shoulder, and it'll look really dramatic. Where as you're walking, we have to zoom out so that we can do that. It makes you look less important. And when we tell them that, it's amazing how quickly speakers get it. We don't tell them don't pace. We just tell them, when you stand in one place, we can make you look great. And when you move, we make you look okay. And so, because we're just following along. And so but when you have these screens, the big thing that happens then is that you are, that experience in that room in, let's say, Silicon Valley, we're going to do this there. That can be exactly the same in New York or in Cape Town or in London or in Paris. They're having the exact same experience. You can have a bunch of people come to those locations and have the experience, but still rub shoulders with each other, and have some of the speakers in those locations as well, but in a little booth where they're interacting, where everybody's on the same plane, in that area. And I think that when that we're continuing. Again, I've done pieces of all of these things to the point where we know it'll work. It's just a matter, but we know that once that starts to become more mainstream, we think that that's going to take over, because it allows the online audience to really have this great experience, and you can open up what really has to happen next with carbon credits and carbon footprints and all these other things. Is you have to stop putting people on planes. Build something that's got 10 cities that are all doing the event. You don't have to put them on planes or in hotels. You can just literally have them be local. And some people can move in, but you don't want to force everybody to do that. So
I'm sure this is old news, but I just saw on my United app, I was buying tickets for a family.
What your carbon impact is?
Yes. Is that new?
It's coming. So there's a strong press to everyone always knowing what their carbon impact is, and there is a growing push for event organizers to publish the carbon impact of their event and to buy carbon credits for it. So they held off on that during COVID, but they've been talking about it for years. Of saying now that it's getting now that the weather's getting more unpredictable, they're basically talking about forcing every company to talk about the carbon impact of their events, and companies are hearing they're seeding that conversation right now. You'll see more of that over the next couple of years. You'll see it where companies will have to do that, or they'll publish that. What they basically said is they'll publish the number, they'll calculate the numbers themselves fairly conservatively and publish it themselves. Like, this is how many tons of carbon Dreamforce required. And if Salesforce doesn't give that number, they'll give it for them. And no one wants that. Next question.
Next one in from Matthew LeCount in Oakland, California. Pardon me. Yesterday, Alex mentioned having multiple phones for TikTok profiles. Are these devices used on Wi-Fi or cellular data? And if on Wi-Fi, is there any fear of data collection from the ISP and LAN?
They're on Wi-Fi because I don't have that many cell coverages. There could be. I mean, I'm not that concerned about TikTok finding, looking at my I mean, again, I don't want it to have access to my phone data. I don't think it's gathering a lot of other data there. It may be packaging that all up, but I'm not that concerned about it. So there you go. Next question.
John Snyder in Reno, Nevada asks, if Zoom has fixed atem crushed blacks, will a custom LUT to fix the issue in camera make things worse in Zoom? In other words, will it be impossible for both Teams and Zoom to have an accurate image?
Good, Chris.
Yeah, so John, likely. It is problematic because, and this goes to the core, and this is something I talk about all the time. People, I'm sure, are sick of hearing of it. You don't want to fix problems. You want to solve problems. And unfortunately, this is a fix. It is a fix that Andy and their team have worked very hard at. Apparently, what we talked about, I think, last week was it can't. Blackmagic can't fix it because
I don't know if they can't, but they definitely aren't.
Right. And well, maybe they can, maybe they can't, but they're not. And so, but the core of the problem is at the atem. So Andy is fixing the problem, but it's not solving the problem. We're just patching the problem. And this is why this sort of mantra of mine is so important, because a lot of people do this, especially us. We're technicians and we're like, oh, I have this one guy I work with all the time. He might be listening. I apologize. I'm teasing you here. It's like, well, I'm going to go to the patch bay and I'll patch into this and I'll go through this thing and I'll patch through this. It's like, whoa. Why don't we just fix the color at the source instead of going through 3 other boxes with knobs and handles and bears oh my. So think about that. Are you fixing the problem or are you solving the problem? It's a big difference.
Well, and I think that it's important that sometimes you have to fix it to solve it too. So it applies pressure. Zoom fixing this applies pressure to Blackmagic or to others to fix it as well. And at some point, this has been dragging on for 2 years. And so when it wasn't solved, Zoom was like, they rolled up their sleeves and fixed it. But I think that now the onus is on either Blackmagic or Teams or whatever to fix it themselves, and work that out. But it's not like, I think at some point when you're on the outside, there's lots of things like I fixed it before Zoom by fixing my LUT. Now you can do a LUT that will change that. Now I think that the way that Blackmagic really could fix this is to put a color a proc amp on every input of their switcher. Just a little Teranex proc amp, because then you could fix the blacks there on the way in, and then that would on everything. That would be, and then they could. The big thing is that if a proc amp was on the switcher, it means that you could color correct every camera. Right now, when you color correct, you can only color correct Blackmagic cameras, but you could do color correction on every camera if the switcher had a proc amp on every input, including color correcting your computer inputs and so on and so forth. Let's go to the next question.
Next question in from Francis Fry in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and it's a QR code question. Which is your preferred teleprompter software for macOS?
I go, Jason.
Well, you didn't mention a price thing, so I really like prompter people. Telescrow, FlipQ, they apparently can't switch over, so it's Intel only. But they've really started some upstream development on Telescroll, and I can't say more than a little bird told me it's about to get a lot better.
Go ahead, Chris.
I use an app that's off the top. The App Store. It's just called Teleprompter, and I got it at the beginning of the pandemic and ended up doing a whole bunch of teleprompting during records and stuff like that. It's got all the features that I'm accustomed to and need. I wish when you hit bold, it was a little more bold, but other than that.
I use Teleprompt Plus, but again, another one that works fairly effectively, and so that's worked well for us as well. Next question.
Next one in from Zach Stallsmith in Chautauqua, New York. From a production standpoint, what kind of gear and leadership would go into broadcasts like NFL's Redzone to allow for the fluidity of showing multiple games at once and having to switch games essentially on the fly?
The big thing is in the player. I don't know about the Redzone, but I watch a lot of the YouTube one where YouTube's giving you quads and you're watching it. What's really great about the YouTube TV? I mean, I have to say that YouTube TV. I was just happy that I could see Steeler games, but they're redefining how you watch sports. I can see a 4-up of games, and I can listen. I can have all 4, but I can just move around and listen to the audio of the one that I want. And so I can sit there and then if I click on one, it'll just take me into that game, and I can watch it if something looks like it's actually interesting, which I think is kind of amazing. It takes a couple. What happens is really that work is not happening on the stream; it's on the player. The player has to be able to support those 4 streams. Has to have multiple audio feeds that are available. You will notice there's a little bit of a delay. It's usually about a 2-second delay. That's because it has to deliver you the next segment. So it'll take 2 to 4 seconds for it to get onto the next segment and give it to you as you click on it. But that's the only delay that you see there. But it's really a lot of the tech there. All the TV tech is all pretty. They're just feeding out what they need to the CDN, whatever that is, whether it's AWS or Azure or YouTube or whatever. It's the player that they have to figure out how to manage all of that content coming into them. Next question.
Andy Kokendorfer from Viera, Florida asking, LinkedIn seems the best alternative live streaming platform for office hours due to the business nature of the platform. Do you agree or disagree?
We're definitely looking at LinkedIn. I have to admit, the problem with LinkedIn is really that I have to go back and look, but I don't believe we can stream as an organization. We need to stream like to my account or something like that, which is, I just need to make sure that we're really ready for that because that's 4,000 people that are connected to me. So it's possibly a good place. The infrastructure of how it manages chat and everything else is a little bit. We don't care about that, but normally it's just okay. But I think that there'll be a big opportunity for us to do that down the road. I think that I'm just a little, I'm a little concerned about it because the only place that I could stream it to right now is my own account, and I just want to make sure that we're really ready for that. But we expect to do that this year. Next question.
Alexander Knight in Port Coquitlam, British Columbia, Canada. Has anyone on the panel tested the new Blackmagic Micro Studio Camera 4K G2?
I don't think anybody has. I think a lot of us have these little I have a couple of the older ones, and I think that I don't know if any of us have gotten the new ones yet. So I think it's still floating around. Go ahead, Jason.
I don't have the new one, but I got the one that does. In fact, it's this feed is the one that is the 4K. Second generation, but it's not the most recent one. So that is actually coming in over Ethernet, and I've got the fancy little box thing back there. It works really well, but it's a little bit not ready for transport. I lost one of them specifically, just perfectly packed in a Pelican case, and nope.
Ooh, interesting. Next question.
Next one in from Vic Hernandez in Springfield, Missouri. Generally, I'll run the full version of Mukana on my computer, but actually watch the live broadcast on YouTube. If a number of us do that, does it mess with the numbers?
It shouldn't. It shouldn't mess with the numbers. It's going to see your IP, so it shouldn't. You shouldn't be counted twice in that area. Not that I don't think it will. But that is usually it's pretty good at knowing whether you're the same person or a different person watching it. So if you watch it multiple times, because what they don't want to do is have people build viewing farms to push numbers up. So they're pretty good at figuring that out. Next question.
Håkan Force from Stockholm, Sweden. Is there any solution for wireless mic and wireless in-ear monitoring in the same device? Seems silly to use different systems.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Well, it's not silly because a good high-quality wireless transmitter for your main microphone, it has to be fairly clean and it has to be free of interference. And anytime you put a transmitter and receiver in the same package, it's going to cause that receiver to be swamped by the signal from the transmitter, so the in-ear monitors may be iffy. Some people have done it. Zaxcom has their method of transmitting 2.4 gigahertz with ZaxNet, which can handle time code and in-ear monitoring on a 2.4 gigahertz return channel to their transmitter. But it hasn't been that successful, I don't think. And the other thing is, if you build two things into one package, if one of those things fail, then the whole thing fails. So you're out of a very expensive solution, and so you're better off to keep them separate. So it's easier to replace one thing without having to affect the other thing.
We'll be talking about trends here in just a second. So if you've got ideas about or questions about what we think is going to happen over the next little bit of time, go ahead and throw those in. So that's what's happening the rest of the week. We, of course, have the speaker workshop or the speaker reader workshop that is at noon today, Pacific Standard Time, 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And then a quick reminder, of course, that we also have a new panelist meeting on Saturday. So this is, if you were thinking about being a panelist, you can go ahead and jump into that meeting. We'll kind of explain what that looks like. We'd love to have you on. So go ahead and join us on Saturday at 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. We'll have that session. Welcome to the second hour. And all this week, we're going to be talking about trends and trends in specific verticals. And so one of the things today we're talking about is graphics. So what do we think is going to change? There's a lot of moving parts right now, whether it's AI or real time or Unreal or lots of other things that are happening in graphics, and not just graphics in 3D or real time, but graphics around print, graphics around, I don't know, print is, I don't know what kind of forward trends there are there, but 2D, and so on and so forth in those areas. But I guess the question for all of us as panelists is, what do we see coming? Also, if you're watching, you can either use the QR code or you can use Mukana and post your ideas. So go to askofficehours.global if you're not in Mukana, or go into Mukana and post ideas of what do you think is going to happen? Where do you think we're going to go as it pertains to graphics? Each day this week, it'll be graphics today, audio tomorrow, video Friday, and infrastructure on video on Thursday and infrastructure on Friday. What do you think is going to happen next? How do you think it's going to happen? That's what we're trying to think about here. The first week of the year, it's a good time to think through that. Mitchell, do you have ideas? Do you have plans?
Yeah, I do have plans as how AI is going to be integrated into everything that I do. And I'm a little bit of a technical Luddite, so they're going to have to take me kicking and screaming into the world of generative AI. But they're doing a good job so far in the Adobe world. And the thing I'm looking for next is motion graphics being affected by AI so that I can do rotoscoping on the fly as opposed to just saying, take that out here, take that there, let it be part of the process of creating the motion graphics. So I think that's the next big thing, at least in the Adobe world.
I know for me, I use Midjourney a lot for entertainment. I use it for example files. I use it in little bits and pieces for my presentations. I don't really use it in work that much. But what I will say is that, but we know where it's going. Like the reason I'm playing with it all the time is I know that we're going to be using it more and more for examples. And where I really use Midjourney specifically, and sometimes DALL-E, is I use it as a way to previs things. So I'm like, hey, we're going to have a big theater, we're going to have this or whatever. Like I had one where we're like, I just wanted to show something that was like a big set that we were going to shoot in. And I just said, make me a set. And I just described it. In about 15 minutes, I made like 200 sets. And I picked the one that I wanted for the presentation. And I just put it up there. Like, this is kind of what we're thinking about. Is it exactly what we're thinking about? No, but drawing it would have taken a very, very long time. It wouldn't have been that much different, And so now I have a photo for someone, because I think a lot of times we have folks that have a hard time getting over the visuals. You're trying to explain something to them, and one of the secrets that I have to getting work oftentimes is that a lot of people will say, well, I'm just going to send them a bid. They'll send a bid for something. And I do that for smaller events, but they'll just send a bid. It's just like it's literally a bid. Like, this is how much everything's going to cost. I will often send a deck. Like, this is what we're going to do, with little flow charts and things and timelines. And there's like eight or 10 pages of pictures of this is what we're going to do. And at the end is the same thing that everybody else is sending, which is here's what all the line items are. I have a pretty high success rate using that methodology. So having fun things to look at that allow me to describe things and use examples and so on and so forth, I think is really interesting. The other the thing that I think is just really groundbreaking that I feel like Adobe is really just nailing is this, just adding it to the software where you're just doing little things. So Photoshop, I think, for me, Photoshop is the one. Like a lot of times I'll build something in Midjourney and then I'll fix it in Photoshop. Like, it didn't do exactly what I want. Instead of keep on asking Midjourney to do it, I'll just go into Photoshop. Like a good example is I had there's if no one's ever seen This Is Fine, the meme. I don't know if anyone's ever seen the meme This Is Fine. And it's kind of a joke between a lot of us of this, like you'll be in a meeting and you'll text somebody like something horrible's being discussed and you'll just text, "This is fine." Like we're all going to go into this fire. And it's a dog with a fire behind it and everything else. So one of the pastimes that I have is actually I do This Is Fine inside of Midjourney. I have hundreds of This Is Fine photos so that when I send them, I can send them to friends that are just like, "This is fine," and it's just like this crazy, and in the style of herring, in the style of all these different things that are there. But I had one of our clients that really likes to put the "This Is Fine" thing behind them in the meeting, like when the things are hectic. And so I just rendered out of "This Is Fine," and then I selected it in Photoshop and just said, "Remove the foreground," and it just gone. And now it just looks like a background, that's there. And that kind of stuff can be done so quickly now. And I extend shots, so I'll get like a square image, and I need to have a wider image, and I just say, make this, just extend it out to 16:9, those kinds of things. So I think that there's all this little work that we do that I think that is going to get better and better and better as we go through it. The other thing that I'm tracking a lot is things like runway.ai. So that this is runway.ai is letting you do animations where you're just watching the video and having, something do those animations. And I think that you're going to see our ability to and again, in the next couple of years, there'll be some point where we're doing a lot of final work in AI. The next couple of years, the real power, as someone who used to do a lot of previs, is previs. Like I can rough something out very quickly to show you what I'm trying to do that would have taken me a very long time. And I'm very clear of how long it would have taken to do. There's so many shots in Star Wars Episode 1 that I was doing previs for that would have been great for us to just do people walking and doing these things. And Runway will now, I think, export to Maya and many other things. And so you can just do your animations as an animator. Just pick up your video camera, run around and do something, and then export it out and send it out as an animation. And that saves us a lot of time to figure those things out. Yeah, go ahead, Mitchell.
That's very significant what you said about in small ways, because if you look at Photoshop and generative AI, you're just doing very, very tiny things. You know how to lasso. You've been doing that forever on Photoshop. And now you've integrated that generative aspect into your everyday workflow. It's not a whole new animal. It's just an improvement in a small way on something you're already doing.
Yeah, and what's interesting is I found that it was a little annoying because they constantly pop up this floating window that has the generative AI, and they definitely want you to know it's there. And at first I was annoyed by it. Now I just find myself using it all the time. I just circle something and go, make this go away, or make this shiny, make this do whatever I want it to do, and it just very quickly is. And you learn how to ask for it, and it gives you a couple options. And so sometimes I'll do it 3 or 4 times to get what I want, and I'll have like 12 options I can kind of select through to pick the one that it did the best at. Go ahead, CJ.
For me, it's helpful to communicate with graphic designers who are actually good at creating something from scratch. I can't. If you give me a camera, I can take a pretty picture. I can edit a image or a graphic. I can clean it up. But if you give me a blank slate, it's a crapshoot.
Right.
If I go into a Dolly or a Midjourney and I say, "Hey, help me make an icon for something," it's going to produce 6 or 7 ideas that then I can sit down with someone who actually knows what they're doing and then communicate better what I want. It saves me that first week of back and forth just trying to speak the same language as that graphic designer. And
I've talked to visual effects supervisors that use it that way, where they're just like, I can show you something and say, and what I can do is I can go to my designer and say, this is kind of this is the feel that I want, but I don't want this, and I don't want this, and I don't want this. Now, eventually we'll be able to get more of that from the AI, but I don't think that we're not. The AI doesn't have enough control over that to do that right now. I mean, we just still, you're kind of, drawing from the very far end of the brush. But I think that we're going to see more of that. As far as other graphics as well, this is only just AI. I think that we are going to see a lot more in the area of digital sets and so on and so forth, especially as we look at the VR world. AR and VR are going to come out, and there's going to be a lot more as far as real-time video. So as we think about trends, I think that, photogrammetry is going to be a much bigger deal because we're going to be capturing more and more objects. I don't know how many have tried this. If you have an iPhone or an Android phone and you go to Amazon and just look for a table, look for a couch, look for a bookshelf, see how many of them ask you, do you want to see this in your room? Just there, and it is the sheer volume that Amazon has figured out how to do this is kind of amazing. And a lot of times you'll see it pop up. If you're on your phone, it'll ask you if you want to visualize it, and it will put it to scale in your room where you tell it to put it. Like I'm about to get a new, like, I don't know, little TV stand underneath where my TV is. And I can literally just pick up the phone and it'll show me exactly what that's going to look like when it's sitting there. And I've ordered things that looked exactly. It was like I ordered a fan, then I prevised the fan, and I looked at it. I said, "Yeah, that looks about the right size." Ordered it. It looked exactly the same. Like it was. And so we're seeing, that kind of stuff. And we talked about that point of purchase technology. We were talking about that 20 years ago. Like, oh, this will be great, and we haven't seen it actually happen, but it's been quietly being added to. And I think that when you combine that with whether it's Meta or Apple or whatever, you're going to see a lot of tools at the price point. That's not why you're going to buy the tools, but you are going to be, when you talk about interior design, you're going to see things where people put their headsets on and they look around and they can say, it'll scan, it'll have the ability, like you will be able to take your Apple Vision Pro, walk around your room, it will build a 3D model of it, and then you can talk to a designer who's jumping in there, say, well, we can do all of this, and we can make it white, and then we could do this. And if you think about combining that with the AI that we talked about, say, what if we we'll put a couch in here, we'll make the whole thing white, we'll do all these things, and we're only a year or two away from that actually probably working. Maybe 2 or 3 years, but it's, where you're able to design locations and really see them, rebuilt while you're walking around in them. Go ahead, Mitchell.
I'm looking forward to the time when you don't have to do green screen. I do a lot of green screen work, and I understand what it's useful for, but I'm looking forward to the time when you don't require that technology in order to separate backgrounds and foregrounds. I kind of do that now with Mocha Pro,
Right.
and RotoBrush now, even in Adobe, which is kind of like that. But I'd love to see green screens go away. It's just a kludge no matter how you deal with it.
Yeah, it's hard to get rid of the green screen just because getting the fine details. You can get rough things removed out of the foreground. And Apple's doing a pretty good job of it when you look at the short depth of field that Apple does. But that it has the benefit of using depth data as well as separating things visually from the background. So the depth data is important to give it hints as to what should and shouldn't be there. So I think that green screen probably still has some legs, because it's just, you can do rough. You can cut things out roughly fairly quickly. I've done some stuff in Photoshop where you just select something and say, separate remove the foreground, remove the background, separate from background, all of those things in Photoshop, and it'll just do it, but it doesn't do it perfectly. You end up going back and, you take your path tool and kind of close up the areas that didn't quite get right. And Photoshop's been working on that for a decade. Adobe's been doing that for more than a decade, 15 years of smart, quote unquote, smart algorithmic based separation. It's obviously not a trivial problem. Next question.
Robert Sababity in Poland asks, are moving backgrounds still going to be trendy in 2024, or are they going to be moving to static backgrounds to minimize distraction?
Go ahead, Courtney.
I've kind of always hated moving backgrounds. We got into that in the 90s and early 2000s, all the backgrounds. If you went and looked at Shutterstock, it's all full of those, moving, everything's moving. But now that everything is streaming and a lot of content is delivered over streaming rather than over broadcast TV, I think they're looking at more static backgrounds because it uses less bandwidth, frankly, and less detail, they may have one thing moving or like a little line moving across or a little line moving up just to give you something to keep it alive. But I think they've realized that it can bog down your bandwidth, and so they're going more to static backgrounds.
Yeah, especially if you're presenting over a WebRTC style platform like Zoom and Teams and anything else that's out there. Gradients and moving backgrounds are not your friend. And even when you look at again, when you want to see what people do when they have all the money, you watch the NBC football or watch the Thursday Night Football. That's all the money. It was so funny. I watched the Rose Bowl in 42 plays yesterday. You say play me the highlights on YouTube TV, and it just plays you all the important plays all the way through to the end. I got there late, and so I just wanted to see what happened in the game. I have some friends that are from Michigan. Anyway, the graphics came up a couple times there, and I was like, that is definitely not all the money. That's some of the money. That's in fact some of the money, enough money to hire an intern to do the lower thirds. They're really bad. And I was like, this is the Rose Bowl, and these are like horrible graphics. So don't look at the Rose Bowl. But if you want to see what the most amount of money that you could spend on something, look at those. And what you're seeing, and I have some complaints about that, they're using LED walls that aren't resolving quite well. But they're not moving the graphics anymore. They're just a really nice, pretty graphic there that they have, and it's much more subtle than it used to be. And I think that we're kind of, we're getting past the, oh, look at the new toy I have, and kind of settling into, how about we make this, and a lot of times, especially as we go to live events, the thing that I talk about is everything is so digital. We're watching it on screen and everything. I always want to go back to analog. So if I'm going to do something digital, I actually want to feel like it's analog. I don't want it to feel like it's fake, because everything else around it is fake. So if we give it, you want to keep on feeding that lower brain a little bit of what it needs. Yeah, go ahead, Chris.
What I find interesting about the discussion about graphics, and I think you said it. You said, you were describing it as all the money. That's all the money, not all the money. I was having this discussion with Preto the other day about a show that we both watch. And he said, yeah, the graphics are horrible. I go, well, how do you define horrible? When you're getting into something, well, hold on though. Fair. But my point is that this is entirely subjective. For every person you find that hates something, you will find somebody that absolutely loves it.
You should look at the Rose Bowl graphics yesterday and decide whether you think anybody
I promise you, Alex, the designer who came up with that would fight you tooth and nail to the end of the carpet about why he likes it.
I think he's just.
They would be wrong though. If it's bad, it's bad.
There's certain levels of bad, and then there's like, I can't believe you put that on broadcast TV. Bad, and that was
show me something.
I'll try to.
You're pretty smart. You can find it pretty quick.
We'll go to Courtney, and I'll see if I can cue it.
I want to see what you think is so universally bad. Nobody would like it.
Universally bad. It's universally bad. I
got to see
Courtney.
this.
If you want to go, that's a matter of taste. Technology, here's an example from Shutterstock of what would be death in streaming. You could hypnotize the person that's watching this if you put this in the background behind somebody in front of a green screen. But that's got moving, every pixel's moving, and it's full of gradients. So if you were to try and compress that and send it over a pipeline, it's going to be death to you.
Nigel had a statement. Let me vamp a little here. Actually, you can find that graphic. Nigel had a statement
I'm not able to find
last
it
week.
I can't. I have to. There's a bunch of permission things I have to do. So, I'll use it when I tear it down.
I thought you had a bunch of screens and a router and YouTube TV.
I just can't do it in real time.
I was so looking forward to seeing this, but
don't worry. There you go.
Chad, I might have to leave. Can you take me out of the panel?
Yes. No, this is Penn State. I didn't see the Penn State one, so I don't know. This one doesn't look as bad as the other one. Anyway, so look. I'm sure it looked great in the early '90s. Like it was like it was weird. Anyway, so I think that as far as moving backgrounds go, though, I do think you'll see a little less of that. I think that. Again, I think you're going to see more and more people moving towards even more physical backgrounds than digital backgrounds, unless the digital backgrounds really look real. And as it's just that it feels better. It feels better when you're watching it to have a real background behind somebody. Go ahead, Mitchell.
Can we all agree that virtual backgrounds in Zoom are horrible?
Yeah, they're pretty bad. They are. I think that again, what I will say is, if you're doing an event. So much is already digital. And when we talk about graphics, don't make it more digital than you have to. I think people actually like seeing people's backgrounds. They like it being different. They like it doing those things. And so I think that there's something that makes it more real for them. And I think that that's what we should be going towards. The real problem for me with digital backgrounds is A, the vanishing point's not matching, so it's feeling flat, and B, The edges, but the edges bother me even when we see that. Oh my gosh, it's so bad. Anyway, next question.
Next question from Morgan Price in Victoria, British Columbia, Canada. Fake backgrounds in live events and meetings were everywhere in 2023. How do we make those better in 24? Better quality keys, better quality 3D images, animation, more useful?
Yeah, I mean, so there's a couple things. One is that the key does make a difference. So not allowing the machine to do the key, I mean, what really has to happen, and the hard part is that for a virtual event, they need to key the compressed footage. What they really need to do is key the footage at the, and I believe Skype was doing this, and I don't think Zoom does this right now, is key it at the computer. So you want to pull the green screen at the computer in the uncompressed data. And the problem is you're still dealing with webcams and you're dealing with everything else. So the way to make that better is to key it potentially in the switcher. Or inside, it has to get keyed before it's compressed. That's the big thing that makes it considerably better as far as that goes. Trying to just separate something from the background, and the problem is the edges are one thing, and then the backgrounds themselves are another. It just feels very, again, garish. And I know that there's a culture in some companies, including probably Zoom, that wants to put up digital backgrounds and so on and so forth. And I think that, and I get that they want to make it so that everyone feels like it's okay to do that, I guess, or blur it. But it is part of what I think creates Zoom fatigue. And it's this fakeness, this unconnectedness. That when we talk about Zoom fatigue, I think it's part of that process. And so I don't think keying is going to be the only thing that fixes this. I think that part of it is to not do it, and figure out what you're going to do there. Again, for a minor event, you might want to do something. But again, when I did digital sets for this show in the first year, but what I did is number one is I keyed it at 4K and went down to 1080p. But the other thing that I did is I matched the camera position and the focal length. So all my vanishing points, the digital version of what that was behind me, looked like it belonged there. And that was a key piece of that puzzle. Go ahead, CJ.
I was in a meeting the other week where I had to, I was close to one of the people on the other side of the call and not the other. And then after it was over, I had to call him and say, he said, "Hey, your video looks really good. I just want to compliment you." I said, "Okay, hey, thanks. And by the way, you need to tell corporate that looks really bad. Just stop that." You can actually go into Zoom and disable virtual backgrounds. If you're the administrator for your company's Zoom account, you can turn it off for everybody. So you're not allowed to use it.
Right. Unfortunately, you can't turn it off for everybody else, but you can turn it off for your own company, yes, and not allow them to use it. It's really, and I know that there are some people who say, well, I'm at my house and I don't want to show everything behind me. And I think that the other thing that we're going to see, this isn't really a graphics, it's more and more video or whatever, is that you are going to see a trend towards more and more people, as this all settles out, more and more people are they're going to take a bedroom, they're going to be looking for a room they're the garage, they're going to look for other things that they can put a room that is their, like this room here that I have. This is the room that I do this in. You almost never see any other part of my house because I don't even take technology out of this room. There's all this gear in here, and then I walk outside and I have my phone. That's it. And so that's I have almost no tech when I walk out of this room. And I think that it's, in addition to making it easier to have it ready for show, it also makes it a much more sane experience as well for me. Go ahead, CJ.
I do hope we get more things like SPX graphics, where you have people who are actually able to put a high quality key over. It's not really a key, but a graphic layer over them to show things like a lower third, or this meeting's about to come back.
Well, there's I have being able to do that is good. Also, in my presentations now, I'm building this presentation right now. I have some frames, so I have this kind of not light, but kind of medium gray background that is all the solid slides, but I have slides that are black with graphics on them. The slide deck is keyed over me all the time. And so as I go through the slide deck, certain graphics appear around me. This is just Keynote feeding in. I'm just doing a Luma key, and certain graphics are just appearing around me as I talk, and then other ones jump in, or I can create a window. So by creating kind of this gray background, this dark gray background, that I keyed it so that the gray background is opaque. So everything that shows up now, there's a little bit of you have to go into, in Keynote, you have to go into all the graphics and decrease their contrast by 1%. So that and that's all it takes, and they'll pop forward again. Otherwise you show up in the pictures, that kind of thing. So you have to kind of go through and treat all your graphics just a little bit. But what that means is now everything I can just choose. You see full slide, you see me, then you see full slide, but I can incorporate graphics around me as well, which is I think works out nicely.
I think I just lost my afternoon. Thank you.
I will say that it's a pretty and the only problem is when you start doing stuff like that, you have to be careful of. I have noticed that it distracts the person watching the slide deck because they're so trying to figure out what's going on. Like there's this kind of as far as shock and awe. Sometimes they're not listening to you talk about the subject because they're watching what you're doing and they can't figure out how that works. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael asking, how will more portable devices like the Xreal Air 2 Pro be used in contrast with the Quest Vision Pro at all?
They're a lot less expensive, and it's nice for flights. So I think that those are, I think that they're pretty cool. But I think that for viewing stuff, they do have some stereo functions that I think could be interesting. But we'll see how they progress. Next question.
Robert Sababity in Poland. What amount of 3D graphics can be used in an event when the speakers come live in a video feed with a plain non-3D presentation? Is too much 3D graphics harmful?
Well, I think that the key is why are you using 3D graphics? Are you using it to impress people, or are you using it to describe something? There's a lot of times when having a 3D image makes a difference. Like you're trying to explain something, you're trying to do those kinds of things. If it's just there to impress people, then I don't know if it's as valuable. And so that's the thing to kind of think about as you kind of go through that process is why are you doing 3D graphics? Now, one of the things is as far as creating some of these events, there's this integration between Zoom and Unreal that Zoom has shown, and I think a lot of folks, there's some folks in our community that are experimenting with it, that I think that's going to be really interesting as far as building out these kind of experiences and playing with those experiences where you're taking people that are on a 2D plane but putting them into a 3D environment. And I think that'll be interesting to see, again, when does that make sense as opposed to when does it just make sense to just have I will say that I will tend to lean towards a real conversation over a lot of shock and awe, other than having the graphics really cleanly tied into what's happening. And again, I think that the balance, Apple's recorded presentations probably find the best balance I've seen between when do I use 3D graphics, when do I use, you'll see a lot of really impressive 3D graphics when they're showing you how a computer is built or how a chip gets built or how the camera works or how that's where 3D graphics really belong. And then, but a lot of the rest of it's 2D and video and things that are because that wasn't needed. Go ahead, Courtney.
It has to serve a purpose. I agree with that. Like I said, if you're doing a product presentation where you're introing a new product and you want to be able to spin it around and show what it looks like on the back or where the inputs are, zoom in on a certain part of it and spin it around, it makes perfect sense for that. Just 3D for the sake of 3D, I think it's probably more distracting than anything else.
Sorry, next question. I was getting ready for the next question, and next question.
Next question for Andy Carluccio in San Francisco, California. Pretty excited for Project Avalanche and Unreal Engine 5. Seems like these kinds of tools will be helpful in the growth of data-driven interactive graphics this year.
Yeah, absolutely. If we look at, let's see here. Yeah, there we go. So this is, we should get Andy on. I think that Andy Blondin, and we'll see if we can get Andy on to talk about these. But I think that I was kind of surprised at how long it took to get to a point where we were really doing lots of real-time graphics inside of Unreal. One of the big problems has been anti-aliasing for a lot of us, and then just building the tools out for it. But I think that there's a lot of opportunity here as far as building motion graphics, and here you can see it like an explanation or a showing something. And this is a good example of where 3D makes sense, to do those things. But I think that definitely what Unreal's doing, and Unreal did a big years ago, maybe it's almost a decade ago, they pushed to figure out how do we get Unreal to work with broadcast. And so they did the 2997 work, the 5994 work, how do we get broadcast quality output and guaranteeing those frames. And I think that this is, different versions of what they did there have been affecting the industry ever since. And the stuff that they're doing in Unreal right now with Avalanche is really exciting. And we'll see if we can't get them to come on and talk about it. Next question.
QR code question coming in from David Brady, who's en route to Tokyo. Just a quick Happy New Year's greeting from 35,000 feet up. Wanted to let you know that the Office Hours radio app works like a champ on United Wi-Fi.
Go ahead, Chris.
David, I'd like to say, please refrain from your Mukana comment should be in the form of a question, please.
This is a
but
Jeopardy.
Travel safe, brother.
Yeah, man, it's so good to hear from you, and I'm so glad that the radio app is working great at 35,000 feet. Go ahead, Courtney.
Love to see you call in from Tokyo once you gets there. And David Brady was when he's been on the panel, he's been one of the few that have the best digital background. You could never tell whether he's in the office or not because he did a great green screen and a good background, and we never knew where he was.
Yeah, absolutely. Next question.
John Snyder from Reno, Nevada. 2024 trend. The advancements of AI will enable front-end users to create better graphics without an expert's eye. Tools like Microsoft Copilot will become ubiquitous.
Yeah, I mean, I think that a lot of the front-end stuff, I mean, as far as thinking about those things and designing those things, I'm kind of amazed at what's coming out right now. The ability to write code and to build things, without having a lot of background knowledge. I think that people get upset about we'll see if CJ wants to talk about that. But I think people think about the operators, not, having competition between, with AI. But there's also, I think people are underestimating the, amazing opportunity. There are so many things in the world that never get expressed because someone doesn't know how to do it. They know what they want. They have a vision of something that could be in the world, and they simply can't do it because the tools aren't there, to do those. iPhone, or phones, Android and iPhones and everything else gave a whole new world to people who couldn't buy a camera or understand how to edit or how to do all those things. And, TikTok and YouTube and everything else are built on these tools that suddenly everyone has, and everyone was able to express ideas that they wouldn't have they didn't have the skill set to do before that. And I think that's going to be, we're going to see a whole explosion of creativity because people aren't contained to their skill set. And I think that the skill sets are still valuable, but I think that there's a whole layer of opportunity that's going to come, that we're going to just see a lot of really interesting things that we didn't see before. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, and earlier I tried using Copilot to generate a background for a Financial Times program. This is what it came up with. It's a little bit busy, though. And the strange thing is it drew a bubble over everything for Financial Times. Is that an omen? That our financial system is in a bubble that's about to burst?
Well,
but it's very busy. I think it's got a ways to go. Copilot is there, and it's free to use for anybody using their browser, Edge browser.
Yeah, I know in Midjourney, I don't really assume the first thing that comes out of my first prompt is going to work. Usually I'm thinking, what will the 80th prompt generate? Like and that prompt for me, because I have turbo mode on or whatever, is like 10 minutes away. I will have, I had one where I sat down and in half an hour I had 400 jobs running in Midjourney, because I was just hitting, I want more of this, I want more of this, and it's just constant flow of stuff and the amount of things that I kind of churned through to find what I was looking for was kind of amazing, and again, it would have taken a very long time to do that by hand. Go ahead, CJ.
Ooh, okay, sorry. I need to get a live demo ready. So I know almost zero about writing code. I've never used Xcode before. I've never wrote a Lua script for DaVinci Resolve before, but I was listening to a back catalog episode. Alex mentioned, wouldn't it be great if there were a way to take the center frame from every shot in a film and export that into a big grid so you could see how the color shifted over time? And I thought, man, that's something that you could probably figure out. So I sat there and probably about 10 or 12 hours back and forth with GPT-4, I was able to come up with a program where it actually, I learned through that process, I learned how to structure an Xcode file, what does a Lua script do, and it did a pretty good job. But I would have never in a million years without ChatGPT been able to get everything down to the logo of what I decided to make for, or the icon for the program. I wouldn't have been able to do any of this if it wasn't something that was in an AI. And just playing with it, I've been having a blast. So for me as a learning thing, it's opening up total new horizons.
And what's fascinating about that also is that, and I'm gonna try to drag you on for a second hour to walk through that, because it's something that's really exciting. Because I have been asking for that feature from Blackmagic for 4 or 5 years. and CJ was like, oh, I can just do it. Like, I heard about this thing. What do you think? And I talked to him, and the goal there is, I've seen these grids built, but they're built painstakingly by somebody who moves the cursor to every frame or whatever. What this does is it identifies all the scenes and then finds the midpoint of every scene, and identifies all the shots and gets a midpoint of every shot, and then makes a frame out of that. And then the poster is massive, right? It's a very high resolution.
The first test that came out of it was like 1.45 gigabytes and 500 megapixels. And I said, that might, if you don't have the RAM, that might not quite make it. So then, I started a whole conversation of, well, what if I allowed the user to select the frame target height of the individual frames,
right,
and then did a couple tests that way. And then what if I let them choose how many images wide by how many images tall the grid is? And now I have sliders, and now I know what padding is. And so it's, yeah.
And by the way, as a non-coder, and building an app that does all those things. Yeah.
I can read, interpret, and understand how the structure makes sense. But also, like, I have one bracket out of place and everything breaks, and then I have to paste the entirety of the code back into ChatGPT and say, okay, what's broken about this?
Right.
And then it comes up and gives me the...
Yeah, it's incredible. Next question.
Bobby Rafferty in Central Florida. 2023, we saw Apple, Adobe, Nvidia, and others from the Alliance for Open USD in August. Then more participation and road mapping in December.
Yeah, I think that USD is going to be, I think that we'll see what happens between USD and USDZ. USDZ is Apple's, zipped version, which they've also made open source, but USD is the more industry standard, and I think that it will eventually win. Like, I think that if you're using anything else, you're kind of on the outside, trying to force some whatever, because it has all the things you need. It has all the scene data and the animation data, and it has all the stuff. And you have a bunch of big companies that are all going, hey, we'd like to be able to pass the data back and forth and stop messing around with all of this shenanigans. So, go ahead, Jason.
Yeah, this is such a big deal. I mean, at least once a week, I will show something on my iPhone to a client, and then I'll send it to them an iMessage, and it blows them away. So yeah, this is only going to get better and bigger.
Yeah, it is like just the stuff of being able to capture something with your phone and then be able to immediately use it for something is truly amazing. And so I think that you're going to see more and more of that support happening there. And I will say that Adobe is doing, the Substance tools are amazing. Like, they're really, and I haven't had time to really jump into the After Effects tools yet, but the Substance, buying Substance is probably one of the best purchases Adobe ever made. They've just really, it's an incredible team that really understood what they were doing. And then they, but I think that Adobe has really taken it to another level with the resources that they have. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael, do you think we'll see easier-to-use tools for building data-driven 3D pipelines with Unreal Engine and Unity?
Yes. We are. I know it feels like these apps have been around for a long time, but we are still in early phases. very early phases of what's going to happen with real-time graphics and being able to drive data into those. I mean, driving data into graphic systems has been around for a long time, and I think that how Unreal makes that available is going to be really interesting. And Unity inside of the more VR centric world. So Unity is we're not going to see that much in broadcast, but we will see it in some of the stuff we're doing with things like the Vision Pro and Meta and so on and so forth. Next question.
Robert Sababity in Poland. Do Event Cartoonists bring any real value to events other than the prints that can be distributed to attendees after the event as a summary or reminder?
I don't know if that's a real thing here in the U.S. So I will say that there's a lot of things that happen in other countries that are kind of part of the culture, and we don't have event cartoonists here that I know of. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, I was trying to think of what this is as event cartoonist. Now, there are those videos that you see where there's an explainer and there's somebody drawing, and I don't know if it's done in post-production or if it's done live, a cartoon version of what's being said and building a picture as the narrator reads the text or describes the event or what's going on. They do a cartoon illustration of what's being talked about. You find a few of those on YouTube, but I didn't know they were doing that in live events. It would be interesting, but how do you take it with you? Because it's the kind of the joy of seeing it is seeing the image build over time. And if you just go back with a cartoon image, a caricature of the person on stage or something, I don't know what the value of that would be.
The one that really got everybody going was RSA and I don't know if this is what Robert's asking about, so I'm answering the question the way I understand it, that RSA did they did a video. This is, let me cut to it here. This was I don't know if this is what Robert's talking about, but what they did is they took a TED Talk from Sir Ken Robinson, I believe it's Sir Ken Robinson. I just want to make sure I got that right. Sir Ken Robinson did it's probably one of the best TED Talks ever, in my opinion, about education and the problem with education and so on and so forth. It's been core to things that I think about a lot. But I never saw him do the TED Talk. All I saw him was this. And RSA took his TED Talk and then added this where they did the speed thing where where he's writing that someone's got really great handwriting and is a really good artist, was able to kind of do all this. And so and these became quite a thing for quite some time after he did it. So anyway, so this is if that's what Robert's talking about, then that is those are still great. I mean, I don't know what it is. There's something about watching it happen while you're talking that I think is actually really powerful, but you don't obviously do that during shows. But afterwards, taking some of them and illustrating them, I think is a pretty slick idea. So I don't know whether that style of graphic I think is actually a really interesting one as far as the drawing and putting those things together. It does help you kind of one of the things I do think that we have to kind of figure out is, I think when we think about graphics, the best way to think about graphics is how do they support the story, and this drawing is one way to do that. But how do we use in a lot of senses you draw that because building the 3D models of that would be very hard. But we're going to get to a point where building the 3D models is not hard. And how many things are we going to see that are being visualized? And I do a lot of things where I try to visualize what I'm talking about as I talk about it. I don't have a bunch of text on my screen. I don't have a bunch of those things. I'm putting up images that underline what I'm talking about all the time so that to help you remember it. That's what we should always be looking at when we're thinking about graphics, in my opinion, is not so much how to impress people, but how to make sure that they're left with more of what we're talking about. Anyway, there we go. That's our ideas around trends for graphics over the next year. We'll see what happens there. Tomorrow we're talking about audio. Thursday, we're talking about video. Friday, we're talking about infrastructure. So we're talking about those three as we kind of move forward. So if you've got thoughts and ideas around those, come tomorrow for audio, come Thursday for video, come Friday for infrastructure. We'll talk about those things, and we'll get your ideas. We'll talk about what we think is going to happen, and we're looking forward to that conversation. I want to thank the incredible panelists who made this show so much more fun. We can't do this without you. We also can't do it without the producers asking all the great questions and keeping the conversation going. A reminder that if we didn't get to your question, we just pushed it back. We'll bring it back forward again. So we didn't get your question. Just stay tuned for. We'll push. If it was a QR code question, we'll push it back forward. If it is your own question that you put in Mukana, it goes back to your notes section. It's in the upper right, little hamburger. We call it the little 3 lines. We call a hamburger. Under the hamburger, you can see notes, and you can open up the notes, and there you'll be able to find your question and resubmit it again. So make sure to do that. And thank you to the incredible back-end team. 7 days a week. We haven't missed a show since March 25th, 2020. And that's because we have an incredible team that's managing the process, that's organizing the process, that is actually executing the show, developing the tools for the show, making sure that we have hardware and software running for the show. It's really an amazing group of people. If you're interested in that, you can look to volunteer. We'd love to have you as part of it. We traveled 62,000 miles today. That is 100,000 kilometers, and that is 494 million bananas for scale. All right, let's go ahead and jump into After Hours.
Suddenly, I'm hungry for a hamburger.
Oh, there you go.
Oh, you don't want a banana? Come on.
Nah, too much potassium.
What do you need? You
So
cannot have
many
too much
bananas.
potassium. Well, you can, but it would take a lot. You have to drink it almost straight.
Banana
I don't
split.
need enough bananas. Yeah, there you go.
They used to give me shots of it when I was in the hospital. They'd be like
There you go.
burning sensation. It was horrible.
Well, I wouldn't do it that way. I just eat
The
bananas.
burning means it's working.
Oh, yeah.
Please
Thank
don't
you.
squeeze the banana.
Yeah, there we go. I forgot my tea today. I'm in scratchy voice all the whole show.
Yeah, me too. Don't forget the show workshop today, 12 o'clock, 3 o'clock Eastern.
So at 360 pixels high, it's about 500. If you do the 40 by 50, it's 500 megs.
Very good.
But you can zoom all the way in. The frames look good. I did a little
Yeah.
144 to
Oh, man.
where is it?
I just think